What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Powerlifters Programming Podcast, episode 11. First podcast with two guests. So Luke is back on, and we also have Joe Borenstein this time. So thanks for coming on, guys. With that being said, let's hop right into it. So you just took, was it 11 days off, Joe?
12.
12 days off
Yep.
after Worlds. So some pretty substantial detraining. I guess let's start with Luke. As a coach, how did you manage expectations going into that? Is there anything you changed about that first block back?
Coming off of like that much detrainment, you're obviously going to be very sensitive to increases in volume just because of the fact that, he was coming off of a peaking week in which we heavily decreased volume. Then also because, he hadn't touched any volume in 12 days. So that was definitely a main focus, was just kind of keep volume low and slowly trickle it in over the weeks. And it was interesting because, bench obviously took the longest amount of time to recover, and it also needs the most amount of volume. So that kind of just like supports the idea that like he was very sensitive to volume and he's going to need a lot of time to be able to build back up his bench strength, especially, on all of the big three, but let alone the bench especially. So we definitely, made a point to ease back into training and not go, right into hitting those peak volume numbers that we were used to, just so we don't shock the body with insane amounts of volume right off the bat. This is definitely more beneficial to like gradually increase the volume this way in order to make progression more linear from block to block, like on the way back up. And then also you want to prevent that excess fatigue. And then you also want to limit your injury risk. And then we also made it a point to focus more on like accessory work, because these definitely tend to exert less fatigue overall in the body. And then they help like recover the overall work capacity that you lost after being detrained for such a long period of time.
Okay, that makes sense. So just ease in so you don't break them. But like, especially squats, you look like you had like the best squat day of your life, right?
It was pretty good on week 4, but the first 3 weeks were.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Let's rewind a tiny bit, and then I'll let you cover this one, Joe. So after nationals, it looked like you just jumped right back into training and you PR'd the doubles like immediately.
Yep.
So how long after competition do you typically start training again? Do you just like hit the primary SBD and then just continue your other days just minus the back off volume, or how do you go about that?
So generally, I go right back into training as if I just completed a week 4. But this time around, I was on a honeymoon, so I could not train. And I chose not to train. That was the first time ever taking like more than 3 days off consecutively. So definitely the body and mind needed that full hard reset more than ever, especially after so many meets back to back, after the injuries I sustained last year. But generally, it's always right back into meet, or right after a training, or right after a meet, go back right into training. And I tend to respond pretty well to that, because meet day, there's no back downs, right? So I'm used to a super high intensity week 4 SBD, and a meet day is like it's such a walk in the park. It's the least intense training session of my entire macro cycle in the week 4s. So meet days are usually easy, and then I go right back into it. And I usually feel really strong after a meet because I'm basically peaked, but also fatigue has just been washed away. Maybe a little bit detrained on bench from not doing any back downs there, but generally speaking, I feel pretty good. And this is the first time, like I said, I did not go right back into training. So it was a learning curve in trying to go about my days and not lifting a weight and actually looking at myself shrink within the mirror. But besides that, it was a great experience, and I probably won't be doing that again unless I do have a vacation planned. But in the future, it's always, or in the past as well, it's always been meet day, then straight up it's training right afterwards.
Yeah, honeymoon.
So can I add something to that as well?
Yeah,
real quick. I was just gonna say, like, we definitely do hop into training, especially if we have like less than 1 macro cycle until the next meet. But with that being said, I do, like, we normally give Joe 2 days off, and then we do a SBD day, like kind of like a secondary SBD. So this will kind of help consolidate the fatigue on one day rather than spread out across the week, just to give them a little bit more time to recover after the meet. And then we just do 1 primer bench day, and then we're right back into the primary SBD. So we do switch up a tiny bit, but like we still, the only thing we get rid of, I guess, is like a tertiary bench day.
We have to get back to the split though. That's mostly why as well.
Yeah.
We SBD on a Friday, and then meets are usually 6 days. So
okay, that makes sense.
6 days. Yeah.
I guess that could help you align your future primaries with like the next meet. Because if I'm correct, like your SBD day was like on Friday or something before nationals, then it was like Tuesday or Wednesday before Worlds, right?
Yeah. It's always one day beforehand. So
okay, yeah. Not trying to get too controversial here, but you guys like after nationals PR'd immediately, one block after. And I hear a lot of people always say like, oh, we got Sheffield, and then like nationals or nationals to worlds is like 2, maybe 3 blocks later, and it's too quick of a turnaround. So performance falls off. I guess, do you expect with good coaching, someone should be able to make that turnaround? Do you think it's coaching error, or do you think it's more athlete to athlete?
Definitely athlete to athlete. That was not the norm. I was not are we referring to this previous block I just did, or the one?
No, not this. I just mean like you had a very good turnaround going from the 8 weeks nationals to worlds.
Oh,
yeah. And a lot of people say that turnaround or the Sheffield to nationals is too quick.
Yeah, okay. So the turnaround is for sure quick. But yeah, I was not expecting to hit double PRs. And
okay,
as you could tell, I don't personally believe, and I don't think Luke believes I am the normative athlete. I'm a little, I guess, an outlier in that sense. So yeah, this is very lifter dependent, and I'd say 99% of lifters cannot just turn around like that and handle some PR weights. So nah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for, because I was wondering if you were going to say, like, because you coach a lot of athletes, if they should expect PR right after, they need to like build some momentum.
Maybe if it was like a quick turnaround, and we're not quick turnaround, but if we went from like a meet where we peaked and hit some PRs across the board, and we go to volume work and we're doing like 5s or something. Like, when's the last time you did a 5, right? Like, most likely you're going to be PR in that 5, most likely at least. So in those cases, yes, we should expect to be in PR territory. But if we're going from peaking to doubles again, we're not going to PR the double. There's just no way. So
yeah. Also, like the way Joey's training is outlined, it kind of allows for him to be able to make that transition from the meet into an 8-week peak very quickly, just because he has the primary SBD, and like you mentioned, the meet day is actually relatively easy for him because he doesn't have any back down work. And so I guess like that would definitely help somebody transition to making, those double PRs right after a meet day.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I'm sure it varies a lot, not even just athlete to athlete, but just approach to approach, where you guys' approach seems like it lends itself to that very well, versus if someone like peaked super hard instead of just training into the meet, they might detrain a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Let's get into your off-season plans a little bit. So before we get into the programming, I'm curious what your body weight plans are, because you're pretty light right now, I believe. And I know you did like one big cut to 74. So are you going to have a similar, or 75, a similar plan where you're like getting heavy in the off-season, maybe going to like do a big water cut eventually, bulk and cut in the off-season, or just what are your plans in general with that?
So I've been pretty much in a surplus since coming back from my vacation. And I came back at like 82.8, and now I'm like above 85. So I'm pretty much filled out at the moment. There's some days where I'm like 86 as well. So I got in quite big, but I'm definitely not going to be bulking anytime or any for the future, at least, because I'm already like, I'm satiated at the moment. I wake up and I'm full. So the plan is to maintain, maybe cut back down a little bit and stay around the like 84.5 to 86 mark. And I don't like to mess with water too much. I might do like a slight loading phase. It's up to like 2 gallons, and then I'll pull back to like a gallon the day before and cut it off like 12 hours. But I don't do like the super big water load phases, drop sodium, drop carbs, saunas. Like, I don't mess around with the hydration aspects. Usually a slight laxative, spitting, and then gut cut, of course. Those are my go-tos. And I can generally cut up to like 2.5, 3 kilos that way. And if I really need that 4th kilo, like I was at 75, then I would water load. I would sauna even more. Yeah, I don't want to bulk anymore. I'm pretty full, and I'm forcing a lot of calories in at the moment. So
I gotcha. And then Luke, obviously he's kind of 2-3 kilos over now, maybe only 1.5. But in the future, as he's filling out the class, what are your plans with him? Like, do you want him to eventually start as he fills it out more, maybe sit heavier in the off season? And then I like Emil and Gustav. I'm not sure if anyone else does this. They have like the strategy where they cut after meets for a block or two. They get really light and they like eat into the competition. Is that something you guys ever plan to do? Or do you think just maintaining a couple kilos above is worthwhile as well? Well, not worthwhile, but just as effective.
Yeah, I would say like I think maintaining at least, anywhere between 2 and 4 kilos above the class is ideally where I'd like to have Joe. Obviously he's not going to be there yet just because he still is relatively new to the class. But with that being said, normally what we do is ideally in an off season we'd have like eight blocks or so, roughly 2 or 3 macro cycles. And so we would time it. So we'd have like the end of a macro cycle be where he's at his heaviest. And then after that, I'd like him to kind of cut and do like a little bit of a body recomp. And then that way he can also eat, kind of bulk into the next macro cycle. So we're kind of just like, he's eating more as he's, lifting the most amount of weight. And then when we do more volume work or when we're, doing less specific work and we're far from where we need to touch peak intensity, that's where he can do his like recomp and cut down in body weight a little bit. So it definitely does change. And it's not like such a static number. But we do have like some parameters in place to where he can bulk and cut in order to, be his strongest on a certain block leading up into a meet.
And then leading into the meet, I know you're talking about doing what'd you call it? The like speed bulk or something?
Turbo bulk, yeah.
Turbo bulk. Was
Yeah.
that just because of the body weight being down, or is that something you generally like to eat a lot into the meet while you water cut or gut cut?
Well, that particular scenario, I did get sick 2 weeks out and I dropped around 2 kilos of body weight. So I was just trying to recomp and get my body weight back up to where it was. Even though I was gut cutting at the time, I was still able to handle a big surplus. But yeah, I generally don't like to turbo bulk. I like to be in a maintenance or maybe a slightly above maintenance for that last week. But outside of that, it was not the norm.
Okay, I was wondering because I've done that before, but like the day before lift, I've noticed if I just eat like 6,000 calories, just like ridiculous amounts of food, the lift just goes great. You feel so recovered, but you can't push that too long or you're up like 3 weight classes, obviously. It's not super reliable. But I think that covers the body weight pretty well. So let's get into kind of the programming changes this off season. I know you're doing some variations, conventionals back. We talked about that a little bit last podcast. So I don't want to get into like maybe the variations too much, try to cover something new, but let's talk about how long in an off season you like to do variations, because there's going to be like, you're doing conventional for a reason to get adaptations. But if you take conventional out for 6 months, maybe you start to lose those adaptations. So you need to kind of find the correct timing, I'd assume, with the meet. So Luke, could you talk about how long you like to do variations in the off season and how close to the meet you like to take them out?
Yeah, normally we like to do variations for roughly 2 to 3 blocks or around like the length of one macro cycle. We kind of try and sync our primaries and secondary days as much as we can within the same macro cycle. But normally, I'll program conventional pretty far out from a meet. Like it is kind of tough with this meet because we are doing the Avankis meet. And so we do want to, be very strong for that meet, but it's obviously not the number one priority. Number one priority is Sheffield. So the plan for right now is to run conventional, 2 to 3 blocks, that first macro cycle back. But then, that kind of runs us into a little bit of a detour with Avankis, but our plan is to kind of just train through the Avankis meet and not, try and peak or like, give it 110%. Like we're saving that for Sheffield, obviously. So the plan is to run, conventional 2 to 3 blocks and then obviously switch to beltless work and then, pause work, kind of trading that relative for absolute intensity as we get closer to the meet. But I find that roughly 2 to 3 blocks is definitely enough time to make those adaptations and also, give your body enough time and enough new stimulus to where you're still making progress from macro cycle to macro cycle leading up to a meet.
When is that meet, by the way? I didn't even know about this.
October 11th.
Okay, so
Nobody knew about it until Luke just said something.
okay, I was like, I'm a bad host. I missed all of this, dude. Sick.
I think I already exposed it a little while ago, accidentally.
Oh, good.
But yeah, we'll keep it on the low, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Like, were you just gonna do the meet and not tell anyone?
Well, they're gonna post the roster soon, which I'm not gonna name names, but I'm gonna be on the roster.
Okay. Well, is that like just kind of a for fun meet, or is there some kind of strategy to it if you want to stay practiced with commands, competition, feel comfortable, or is that just pretty much for fun?
It's just for fun. It's gonna be a money meet as well, so might as
Oh,
well.
nice.
And it's my sponsor, Advances, so I think it would be a great opportunity and time because I am going to be doing singles at the same exact time frame where the meet was taking place. So October 11th, I would have 4 blocks, and I was going to trickle down to singles in 4 blocks regardless. And like I was thinking about the macro cycle before even I heard about the meet, and I was like, well, I want to hit singles around halfway through the off season to see where I'm at, probably PR them as well, maybe go over 900 again. And I was like, wait, there's a meet literally the day after I do my singles. I do it on a Friday. The meet's a Saturday. I was like, I can do my 8-day taper and just go to meet, collect the check, and have some fun, I guess, and make it more specific as well because I actually get commands. I have to do a little cut for it. It just makes things a lot more interesting. So I'm just gonna run through it and have some fun.
Are you going to go all out for it? Like, obviously, maybe not. The off-season training might look a little bit different. Like, are you going RP 10 on all the lifts?
I'll go as intense as I take my training.
Okay, I gotcha.
So maybe RP 10, yeah.
I was thinking in my head, I was like, that means you're going all out, right?
maybe, most likely.
Okay. What was I saying earlier? We're talking about variations in the off season before Luke dropped the bomb on us. People like that.
Yeah.
Going into Instagram, little Instagram clip, like new meat drop.
I already exposed it. It's fine. The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, how did you expose it before?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what I was doing, but I think there was like some dude. His name's Max. On Instagram, he's kind of like a powerlifting news channel, you could say. And I just slid up on his story because he posted something about the Ivankas meet getting a lot of notoriety, and I was like, "What if I told you like Joe was gonna be there?" And then he posted that shit. So.
Okay, nice. Nice. Did either of you repost that?
Nah.
Did you either, Joe?
No, I didn't.
Okay, that's probably smart because then the whole world would know.
No, but then when Advances commented, they're like,
Yeah.
I heard you doing a meet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. They want me to keep it secret, but they want to do like little drops here and there to like, I don't know. It's funny as hell, though. I don't know what the plan is.
All right. I'll get back to some normal questions.
Yeah, I'll get.
So I know some other coaches do this in different ways. So I'm curious how you guys decide to build blocks into one another, because obviously you're building some momentum with the variations, and a lot of times like it's very common to do like 3 reps, 2 reps, 1 rep with the different top sets. But I know like Flex, for example, he likes to end blocks a little bit fatigued sometimes, and then the following block will pull off that fatigue. Or Marcellus kind of does the opposite, where he ends it intentionally not maximal, just so you can like continue momentum. Maybe he'll do a singles block followed by another singles block. Do either of you in your coaching, including you, Joe, mess with that with athletes at all? Or do you just find like as he's been going up a weight class, there's just not really a need for that yet? He's still making good enough progress, or maybe that's something you don't want to experiment with. Can you just give me your thoughts on that, how blocks feed into one another?
So for my own athletes, I have a plethora of, I guess, strategies we can call them. There's some lifters where they don't need such a pullback or a conservative week 4 to feed into the next block, but I have others that need to thrive off that intensity, and they need that exposure to feel strong for the entire macro, right? So I usually see this with like max arched, max grip benchers. They need singles, they need a high intensity. And depending on where they're at, like a conventional lifter, I can usually stray away from that. They can end a block at RP 7.5 to an 8, and they can be fine. And, next block, they can hit a PR, right? They just don't need it. So it's very lifter dependent. I don't usually give year-round singles on squat and deadlift. For bench, it's way more common. I think like damn near like half of my roster has some sort of year-round single built into it, whether it's a fatigue single, a variation single, or a top set comp single. And like I said, that usually tends to be people with the bench build, right? Max arch, max grip. But yeah, it all depends on the lifters. For myself, no, I don't. I thrive off super high intensity every week 4, and I like to see the objective progression and the objective PRs. Like, of course, I can end a block at like a conservative triple, and it can be an RPE PR where it moved faster than the last time I took that triple. That's not fun in my mind. Like, I'd rather do a set of 4 and just PR it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
I'll let Luke take the reins on that one for myself.
Yeah. I mean, basically we do like try and, build one block into the next, but we also obviously try and, PR every single block. Like Joey was kind of saying, he's able to do that. He's able to reach high levels of peak intensity as well as just relative intensity. He's going RP 9 to 10, I'd say, like every week 4. But, we slowly progress the reps in the top set, like you were saying, Colt, from block to block. And then eventually we trickle down into singles where he's very well prepared. But that's just kind of what works for Joe. A lot of other lifters, they definitely need 2 or 3 blocks, where it's a little bit more submaximal, kind of 1 or 2 blocks out of their peaking block. But then, eventually they reach their top end strength. But we definitely do not see that for Joe. We're able to go block to block, hitting that peak level of intensity and then recovering very quickly. And I think that like one of the strategies that we use that allows us to do this very well is, wave loading on the week 4. Especially, there's a very unorthodox strategy, but we wave load the whole week 4, but we also wave load the week 4 primary SBD. So you can kind of think of it as like the week 4 back downs for the primary SBD are kind of like a week 0 for the next block. So it pretty much sets us up directly for the next block. And then that's how we're able to make those smooth transitions while also hitting that high intensity on the week 4.
Yeah, I'm not the type of lifter that needs a baseline like workload on back downs to feel strong on the top sets. My back downs don't fluctuate too much. They definitely don't increase 25 kilos my top sets, but I take pretty decent jumps, like around 15 kilos on my back downs for like squat, and then deadlift can be 15 to 20 in my back downs. And even though those are fluctuating pretty greatly, I think I need the super sub max work and like the useless work on the front half, so I can feel good on the back half. And I respond well to it, but majority of lifters, I think, will not do that. They need that baseline to stay prime. They need that baseline to make their top end feel good on that top set. So
That's funny. I made a post about that, like the week 4 back downs being like the week 0. I made a post about that like a week ago. So what I'm hearing here is you guys are just stealing my ideas.
Yeah, basically.
You're like, I need some good ideas to talk on this podcast. Let's go check what Colt posted. I'm just kidding. I remember in the last podcast, you said you were trying some higher intensity backoffs on, I think it was maybe his tertiary and quaternary. I don't even know if I said that right. Quaternary day. I've never said that word out loud. I've only read it on Instagram. But you were like lowering the rep ranges. I think the RPE was staying pretty similar. You said you wanted to keep trying that going forward and keep pushing it. Is that something you have experimented with more? And if so, how's it going?
Yeah, we did that leading up into the Worlds prep actually, on the quaternary day, increasing the peak intensity. And honestly, we didn't really get much good data on it just because Joey did get sick 2 weeks out, and then that kind of, trashed our whole prep. But we still managed to hit, 215 on the day. But I will say the block prior, we also tried that out, and we hit, 215 for a fatigue single. So you could say kind of worked, might not have worked, probably need to experiment a little bit more with it. But one thing we have done that has worked very well instantly after implementing it is actually lowering the intensity on the secondary day, or the day furthest out from the SBD. So the day 2 days after the primary SBD, we actually lowered intensity on that day, and we actually increased volume a little bit. And this has actually led to a little bit like higher peak intensity strength on that primary SBD. So we kind of flip-flopped the days a little bit. We like lowered intensity on the secondary day, and then also increased the intensity even more later in the week. Did kind of lead to a little bit better results for Joey's bench almost instantly.
Did you adjust the volume on the other days or only on the secondary?
Really only on the secondary. So we switched from doing more like very low reps per set work to a little bit more moderate to high rep per set work. So we went from like doubles and triples on that secondary day to like a top set of 4, and then back down 6s. So
okay, cool. And then is that whole intensity scheme, is that something that you guys think is worthwhile to try on a squat and deadlift? Why or why not?
Joe, do you want to go, or you want me to take it?
Keep going. I'm listening.
Okay. So we actually tried it a little bit with deadlift on the conventional. So we just hit a triple conventional, pretty heavy. Actually, it was a set of 4 unconventional, pretty heavy. And then we dropped one whole set, and then we also wave loaded. So we went sumo on the back down instead of conventional. So I'll repeat that. So we had one basically very heavy conventional primer set 4 days out from the primary SBD, in which he hit 733 for 4 this past block. And we dropped one entire set of back downs as well. So he basically really only had one very heavy set of conventional to prime him for the primary SBD, which is something that we really don't do very much. Normally, we have to do a couple of sets at least, because we thought that like the deadlift would be detrained. But then we get this data that like, hey, he really only needs he needs a pretty heavy, relatively intense set on conventional in order to prime him for the week 4 primary SBD. So we kind of did try that strategy out a little bit in terms of raising the intensity on that secondary day in order to prime the primary day. But for squat, we really haven't done that, just because I think like squat, Joey definitely needs to build a little bit more muscle around his quads. We could definitely try a higher intensity primer set, and we have done that in the past. But I think this far out from a meet, it's better to kind of stray away from that peak intensity on the secondary day and just, build more muscle, and then, eventually get to that higher peak intensity closer to a meet.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially being far out from a meet. All right, Joe, I got a question for you, kind of putting you in the hot seat here.
Yes, sir.
So the people love talking about the high frequency Agita stuff. I don't expect that you guys are going to suddenly abandon all the progress making program you've been doing and try this. But especially now that there's been talks of Perk, he's doing it. Obviously the circumstances are special because of the baby and everything. And Nori is deadlifting 3 times a week. Oh shoot. Sorry. My computer just, 1 sec. All right. We should be good. And then Nori is deadlifting 3 times a week. I've heard quite a few people, they're always curious about that. I posted that reel with Joe, and everyone was DMing Joe. Joe told me, he was dude, we might have made a mistake. I'm getting so many DMs. It's horrible. Everyone wants to change to 6 times a week SBD. So you guys want to talk about, you guys have a more normal frequency on squat and deadlift, the 2 times, when it would be worthwhile to go to a 3 times a week or 4 times a week squat and deadlift?
Ooh, that's a tough question, because I have no experience with any of my athletes deadlifting and squatting 4 times a week. I can see how it would work, hypothetically speaking. Just take up all the volume and intensity, spread it out throughout the days. And I guess the more frequent exposure you have, the more you grease that groove, the more primed you become, and you just become a more well-oiled machine, right? But personally speaking, I wouldn't like the mental toll of doing the same thing over and over. And I'm sure, yes, you're throwing in variations, but you can't be doing that many accessories with that amount of frequency. And as someone that needs to fill out the class as much as possible, as someone that's still so young, I think that hyper specificity approach just leads to burnout. And I have no idea how they're going to look in 5-10 years, but we have a lot of data on my type of frequency, and the lack of specificity, far off from me building up to it. It's at this point, you can call it old age programming, because in the past it was all about bands, conjugate, all that. But now, I guess the new stuff is hyper specificity, hyper frequency, and now my type of programming looks outdated. But I do enjoy it the most, and it's so nuanced, and we'd just have to wait and see. I don't think everyone, or majority of the majority of lifters should be even trying this. It's too extreme in my opinion. When you need it, no idea. That's above my pay grade. I can see those that just, I don't even know, because I feel after that tertiary squat, do you need any more priming? I don't think it's a priming issue at that point. Is my center of mass thrown off? Is it really? Do you need that 4th day? Do you need to dismember your entire program and just allocate all the days and spread it evenly throughout? I don't know. That is a question that I have yet to be answered, and I need to see this work with more than just 2 or 1 athlete, because I haven't seen it work for Perk yet. I've seen it work for Agita. So outside of Agita, I am very I'm iffy on the subject. I'm not a believer in it just yet, because she could just be a hyper freak. But at least for myself, I don't plan on experimenting with that anytime soon. So
Yeah, I have similar thoughts. Like, especially you pull mid-8s, you bench almost 5.
yeah.
So Agata, I mean, she's obviously insanely strong, but she's not pulling mid-8s. So each day that she comes in is going to be a little bit more meaningful. Versus if you were to do that, your intensity each day, like you might have slightly better technique, but your intensity would have to be so low that would the technique really transfer over the heavy weights. And then if you're only touching like 65% to recover on a lot of days on your deadlift, that just might not be that great of a stimulus. So I think in a case like you guys, 2 times a week sounds a lot more logical. And obviously it's working. So you did touch on accessories though, and how it'd be tough to program accessories with that. Either of you can cover this one, but how do you go about doing bench accessories with a 4 times a week frequency? Like, do you like putting them on certain days so you're fresh on the primary, or like just how many accessories do you really do when you're benching 4 times a week?
So in regards to like pec work, I do have 2 fly variations that are pretty sub max just for pec health reasons. I don't really push it too hard. And my only true like a hard accessory I do for the pecs would be my incline barbell at the moment. And it's super, super fatiguing, but that's why I'm doing it so far out from the meet. And then I'm going to transition that incline barbell to, let's say, an incline dumbbell after another 2 blocks, and then incline dumbbell, I'll go to flat dumbbell. And then from there, I may maintain that into the meet or do a machine press. As you can tell, I get less fatiguing, more specific the closer I get to my meet. And that generally shows that there's some fatigue trade-off that I'm looking for, but that's pretty much all I pretty much do. Yeah. Wait, I'm trying to think. I have a dumbbell press, I guess, shoulder dumbbell press, but it's not really bench specific. It does carry fatigue into my primary for sure, but then I just dump it on my week 4 anyways. But I just do that to just, get boulder shoulders, right? Just get jacked, right?
Yeah.
I do care about my physique in a sense. That along with lateral raises twice a week, and then I have 4 tricep movements that I do as well. And I do pull back my quaternary accessories because my quaternary day is only 2 days prior than the primary. And I do have, pushing accessories that day where I would pull back for my week 4 to boost my recovery. But my accessory work is also paced a week in advance. So you can say that my week 4 is like the week 1 for accessories, and my week 2 is like my week 1 on the SPD is my week 2 of accessories. And then it's just paced in a way that I can recover the most on that week 4, but still get 4-week push with my accessory work. But yeah, like I still like to push them. I like to get jacked, but I'm not doing much for my pecs besides like the sub max pec deck work and the incline barbell, which is on my secondary day. So it's the furthest day away from the primary. So I make sure that I'm going into that primary session as recovered as possible. And then that accompanied with the pullback on the week 4, I pretty much show up, as fresh as I can.
That's smart. I also think the pec deck sub-maximally is very underrated, especially as you get heavier. Like the mobility gets a little bit worse. Like the heavier I get, the more I'm like, I feel like my mobility is going to get bad enough one day if I'm like 300 pounds. Not that I'm even close, but like that I'm going to injure myself from just being so immobile. So I do that too. I'll get like a dumbbell and just do dumbbell flies, literally just with like 10 pounds, stay mobile. I think it's underrated.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do have 2 focus days where like the first day further from the primary, I'll do the pec deck a little more intense, lower reps, but it's still capped at like a 7.5. And then the quaternary day, I'll do like higher rep, like 12 to 15s, same RPE, obviously much lower intensity in terms of load cap. But yeah, I treat it just for health and full ROM. And I've noticed my pec health has gotten so much better with it. So definitely a sleeper for sure.
I just have some more like general programming questions that I think people would be interested in. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Joe exactly. If you want to talk about him, that's totally fine too. But let's just start with you, Luke. So there's a lot of ways to program backoffs. Like, of course, you could push them pretty close to failure and you'd have to do less sets, or you could go very submaximal and do more sets. But where do you personally like to start an athlete off? I'm sure everyone's different. Where would you recommend, like RPE wise and just percentage wise, that people try out first?
So I'm definitely a coach that likes to emphasize, technique prowess over, overall peak intensity movement as I start out with an athlete. So I would say definitely err on the side of more sub max work, especially for things like backoffs after like a heavy primary set or whatever. Because I do like to program primary SBDs, and so those can get very strenuous. So especially on primary SBDs, you want to have, more sub-max back down work in order to be able to recover and not carry too much fatigue into the week from that session. But I would say like backoffs is like you kind of get to know a lifter. They obviously, they depend really on the lifter and, what they really need. But I guess going for somebody like Joe, with bench, they differ from day to day, but we normally like to drop around 5 to 7% backoffs throughout like the secondary through quaternary day throughout the week. And then on the primary day, we like to drop it around like 10%. And then for something like squat and deadlift throughout the week, they'll drop by about 15%. And then on the primary SBD, they can drop by as much as like 20%, especially on the week 4 day where we kind of try and wave load that session from a volume standpoint as well as intensity in order to feel fresh going into the next block. But I mean, I would say like generally speaking, if you have better leverages for a certain lift, then there's going to be less fatigue carryover from back down. So you can probably try and get away with higher level of intensity just because they are in a more advantageous position. So they will, endure and accrue less fatigue from back down to back down if they do have those better level leverages.
Okay, and then how do you like to approach accessories? I know there's I'm probably butchering this. There's like an old school saying that's like either 20% or 80% comp lift, and then whichever one is the opposite is for accessories. I think that's probably pretty like random thing someone said like 30 years ago. I don't know if there's much validity.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not looking for like you to say an exact percentage, but are you more along the lines of, like you said, you're very technique, let's get the majority of the volume in through SBD, or with certain athletes, are you more like, yeah, we'll do SBD as just the technique, but then the real like driving force is maybe pushing some accessories hard?
This definitely depends on where you're at in terms of training. Like I said before, coming off of like that amount, like that level of detraining for Joey, taking 12 days off after a very intense world's prep. I like to definitely stray away from the back down work, and I like to incorporate a lot more accessories because I feel like this just helps with overall work capacity and it doesn't like shock the body like I was mentioning before. But like, yeah, it definitely depends. Like farther out from a meet, you're obviously going to have more accessory work. And then, as you get closer to a meet, you're going to trade some of that accessory work for just extra back down work. But we try and keep the back down work and like the percentage drops pretty much the same. I mean, definitely I'd say farther out from a meet, there's probably less of a back down drop just because there's less absolute intensity. And as we get closer to the meet, the back down drops become, a little bit more prominent, so we can still hone in on that technique, but then also reach that peak level intensity on the top set.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense too. So it's kind of like a similar strategy to the variations in the off season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
because like I think my buddy Don Klein, love the guy. He's a great coach, but he basically said, and I kind of agree with him, that like 2 sets on accessories is kind of equal to 1 back off set. So, maybe later or maybe earlier in the off season, you take off 1 back off set and you incorporate another prime mover accessory like RDLs if it was deadlifts or something like that. And then eventually you add in that back off, as you get closer to a meet.
Okay, cool. Good rule of thumb. Let's hop back to Joe. So on the King of the Lifts podcast, I heard you say the international travel was maybe a little bit overhyped, and your total did drop, but I do believe you that it was just like you got a little sick. I 100% believe you on that aspect. But is there anything that you did to handle the travel well, or anything that you're going to change going to Sheffield that like maybe you forgot to pack whatever and it would have been helpful?
So nothing or everything I did to prep me for the travel, I think went perfect. And I'm just going to replicate that for Sheffield. And it'll be even easier because I can actually read the labels this time and not ask my translator to tell me how much protein is in a certain food I'm trying to eat. So yes,
That sparkling water.
Yeah, the sparkling water cooked me. Drinking that every single day is whatever. Back to the question. So travel does affect you in the sense that you have to respond in a certain manner so you can mitigate the effects of it, right? So if you have your sleep schedule oriented in a certain way and you're losing sleep to travel and the time difference change and all that, then yes, it's going to affect you. But if you're training at a certain time of the day, if you're sleeping at a certain time of the day, waking up later to acclimate to the new time zone, so you're basically putting your body in that new time zone, right? All that is dialed in prior to getting on that plane, and your internal clock is already set to the clock over there. It can't affect you because your sleep is going to be the same. You're not losing sleep. Your diet's going to be the same. Maybe the travel in the air is causing some weird fatigue carryover. Like if you're 10,000 feet up for some reason, you can't heal now, I guess. I don't know. But if every little thing prior is oriented in the way that when you show up, you hop off that plane, your internal clock is already set to that time zone. You're not going to lose any sleep. I didn't lose any sleep. I slept more. My diet, I was in a surplus the entire time. So it does affect you if, let's say, you have a 9-to-5 job, you have kids. You can't orient your entire life schedule prior to travel, right? In those cases, you're going to get smacked up. You're going to take the L in the loss of sleep. In my case, I didn't lose any sleep. I slept even more. I ate even more. Everything was dialed into a greater degree. And yes, I did get sick, so that kind of sucked. But if we look back on the week 4 that I did in the gym, compared to how much I peaked on meet day for Worlds, that peak was greater. I got more of a strength boost with the travel, with the peak from week 4 to Worlds than I did from week 4 to Nationals. The only difference was that my week 4 was like 20 kilos weaker than the Nationals week 4. So I did kind of bridge the gap with that peak, but the strength I left off before the peak was just so much lower because of the sickness. I dropped 2 keys. So yeah, I'm gonna copy everything I did, bring it to the Sheffield travel, and hopefully that time around I don't get sick and I can bring it all to the platform. But yeah, it can easily affect you if you let it affect you and you're not your internal clock is not set up ready. If you're losing sleep because of it, you will be weaker, right? Like sleep is a vital part of recovery, and if you don't have as much sleep, you're like physiologically speaking, you're not going to be as strong on meet day. But in my case, I didn't lose any. I slept even more. So it's like I understand what they're saying, but they didn't see the entire process leading up to it and how I prepared myself before even stepping on the plane and stepping off the plane. Like I did everything already. Like my mind was already in Germany before getting on. So yeah, I don't think the travel played one role at all in my performance.
Yeah, it seems like a lot could go wrong, but if you're very prepared, you don't like accidentally fly to a different country or something. Like Russ, that's absolutely crazy. He still went above the world record. I thought he was destroyed after that, but that's crazy. But as long as you like plan ahead, nothing too crazy out of the ordinary happens, you should be fine, right?
Exactly, I agree. It's a lot harder though. It's easier said than done because if you have kids and a full-time job, you don't have the privilege to do everything I just said. So
yeah. Sorry, if this is like an invasive question. Do you plan to have kids one day?
Of course, that is I guess the biggest goal of life. So
like how many years away? Are we like a long time away, or is this something you're gonna have to balance like in a couple of years?
Before I'm 30 for sure.
Before you're 30? Okay, so we got some time.
A little bit more, yeah. Hopefully.
Okay. Yeah, you just got married. Like Perk's having kids now. Like everyone's having kids. It seems like. So I'm like next year, I'm dropping out of Worlds. Like we see people dropping.
I'm oriented so that like I'll time it so my kid is not born like after Nats or between Nats and Worlds. It'll be like in the deep off season, so I don't got to sacrifice no meats or nothing.
That's an amazing answer. Deep off season with kid. Love it. And then also your life is like very oriented around powerlifting too. So I would imagine that whenever that day does come, like I know like Taylor, he has like a full-time job with a kid too. So that's tough to balance. But like I also think that's kind of to your credit though. I mean, it makes it easier for you, but I'm sure you've also partially intentionally structured your life around powerlifting to help your powerlifting, right?
For sure. Even when I was in school, I'd structure my entire class schedule around my SBD day. So yeah, I've done this for the last like 4 years, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's what it takes.
Yeah.
Last question for each of you. Whoever wants to answer first, go for it. Do you have any underhyped or overhyped powerlifting ideas or trends that you've seen?
You can go ahead, Luke.
Yeah. I'd say like underhyped would be training into a meet for like a peaking strategy or just like simply wave loading accessories, especially if you're like just starting out. Like there's no need to try this insane peaking strategy or whatever. I would say having a primary SBD day in your training would also be an underhyped programming methodology. Like I would say wave loading the week 4, kind of going off training into a meet, but just like getting in the habit of wave loading a week 4. Front loading accessories would be underhyped as well, just to make that week 4 a little easier. And then maybe like just a little bit more specific, I guess, just stacking more intensity later in the week for bench closer to your primary day is underhyped. Obviously, these are going to vary from lifter to lifter, but just from what I've seen with Joe, I think like those are definitely underhyped. And then overhyped, I would say probably year-round like specific training or like overdoing variations on the other side of the spectrum. You got to kind of like find that happy medium to where you can make the most amount of progress with like become the best of both worlds. Like constantly trying to PR singles and like probably ultra high frequency and volume, like we were kind of touching on earlier. I think that's kind of like only for a very niche set of lifters. I think you have to, have your whole life centered around powerlifting in order to make that work in the first place. And I think that just for the average lifter, or just for most lifters in general, that's just probably not going to work. And then also another thing that would probably be overhyped would be like excessive RP based backoff work, or like just excessive auto regulation in general in your training. I feel like you definitely need to have some level of like forcing progress, whether it just be like maintaining percentage drops on back downs throughout the block. You can't just have like your back downs go all over the place just because you feel like shit one day. Just because you felt bad, like it's just like bad data. Like Sean Noriega says, no bad days. Like that is bound to happen, but you still need to get the work in at that percentage in order to see progress later down the line. You can't kind of cheat yourself out of it by just taking an easy way out. And lastly, I guess like just overly complex periodization schemes. I would say like linear periodization works well for most lifters, and just like progressing the back down work or progressing the top sets linearly, rep by rep, mesocycle by mesocycle is severely underrated today.
What about you, Joe? You took a lot of really good ones, so good luck.
I know. So I'll start with underhyped. Deviating from specific work. So as you know, like we're doing conventional in the off season. Some people are scared to deviate because they need to have a certain amount of priming effect going into the primary, where they're like, I need this percent, I need this movement pattern, or else I'm gonna feel like shit. They're too scared to try something new. So a better way to word it would be to try something new. That is very underhyped. It's okay sometimes to deviate, and when you're deep in off season, you're far out from the meet, that's actually the time to maybe don't do the bread and butter stuff that you're usually doing. It's okay to experiment a little bit, because like what Nori said and Luke just repeated, I guess, there's no such thing as bad data, right? All data is good, whether it works or doesn't. It's just another tool for the toolbox. Now you know whether or not to keep that in or throw it out. So try something new. That is very underrated. Something else that's underrated. I see this a lot with the newer power lifters, and it's tracking macros. For some reason, I have a hard time with getting some of my athletes to. I have a whole macro tracking sheet in my program. Half of them are blank. I get on my athletes all the time, but tracking macros, and not just the actual macro itself, but the food source in which it comes from. A lot of people say, "Oh, I get my calories in, I'm fine. I get my protein in, I'm good." But when you look at the source, all you see is Fairlife, protein shakes, protein bars. Like there's no micronutrients in any of the food sources they're getting it from. So diet is pretty much, or the actual food source itself is underhyped. I think a whole balanced diet is for sure something we have to be all striving for. I don't want to harp on it too long, so I'm gonna go to the overhyped section, see if I can think of some. But Luke basically took like every single one.
Yeah.
Overhyped. Agathos program and Perks program at the moment. Everyone's just like, how do I do it? How do I do it? Let me see it. I'm like, you just started lifting 2 years ago. You do not have to be worried about 6-7 times a week SBD sessions. So I'd say just the eagerness to try it out and wanting to experiment with it, even though, yes, I just said experimenting with new things is good and it's underhyped, but going into the extreme of 7 times a week SBD, I think is a little bit overhyped. Most people don't need it. And Luke said primary SBDs are underhyped. I think they're overhyped. A lot of my lifters ask for it, and I get a lot of DMs about them. And most of the time, I steer them away and say, like, if your life isn't dictated around powerlifting, if you're coming home from a 9 to 5 and you want to do a primary SBD, bro, it's not happening. You ain't gonna go in there and expect to PR all 3 lifts. So for the majority of people, it would be overhyped. What else? Or how do I word this? Minimal fatigue accessories are overhyped. So being too scared to do an incline barbell because of the fatigue it accumulates, so you swap out for a machine press the entire year. There are phases in which you can steer away from this. Like I said, the further you away from a meet, the less, I guess, specificity you need, the more fatigue you can accompany with accessories. So a couple of overhyped of variables, I think, but the main ones, like I said, the eagerness to try the hyper specificity 7 times a week, mitigating or trying to always pick the least fatiguing accessory, no matter the off season or no matter the macro. Those are some pretty good, I guess, overhyped things that I can think off the top of my head that Luke didn't steal. So
That's funny you say that, the fatigue accessories, because I have someone coming on tomorrow, 2 guys, to talk about like science-based powerlifting and like what science-based stuff gets wrong. Do you guys know Declan and Alan Choi?
I'm sorry, bro.
No,
I guess
never heard of it.
Fine. They're both like very like science-based people, but also kind of gym bros and actually like make good progress. So I'm very interested to see what they say.
Definitely.
I'm sure they'll agree with what you're saying though.
For
But
sure.
that's all I got. Oh my gosh, my hamstring is cramping. Holy crap. Sorry. That's all I got right now. So do you guys want to say where they can find you if you got any coaching spots open? I know Luke, you opened up some recently. I'm not sure if they're still available, but you can start us off.
Yeah, I'm available, coach.eck on Instagram. Just hit me up in the DM if you want to fill out a coaching application. Starting to find a little bit more time, getting on my feet a little bit with the, coaching a couple more athletes. So yeah, if you guys are interested, definitely hit me up.
Awesome. Joe might have some competition in a couple of years. He gets one of these young 83s.
Hopefully. But yeah, you can find my coaching at p4pcoach.com or my coaching page, p4p.coaching, or it's _ coaching. It's in my bio though. Just look at the bio.
It's p4p.coach.
It's not,
right?
oh, that's what it is? I'm not sure.
And maybe not on Instagram. I know the website is.
But yeah, I have a website regardless. I also picked up another coach, a secondary coach named Phil. Great dude. I've known him for like 5 years, and we're both expanding and trying to. I only got like 5 spots left, but he definitely has a lot more to fill out because he's trying to push up to like that 40 mark. So yeah, definitely reach out if you like. You can shoot us a DM. Personally, I would not shoot up a DM to mine because they get flooded and I don't got enough time to sort through them. But DM the coaching page or fill out the inquiry form at p4pcoach.com.
All right. Love it. Thanks for coming on, guys.
I appreciate you having us.
No problem. Yeah, thank you very much.